The Scott Pilgrim game is coming back, and that's fucking rad. After abruptly disappearing from digital storefronts at the end of 2014, likely due to licensing disputes, the game was unplayable to new audiences for half a decade. This especially sucked because the Scott Pilgrim movie was a notorious sleeper hit, and it took a while for people to discover and appreciate the world and story first crafted by Brian Lee O'Malley in his graphic novels. Developed and published by Ubisoft in 2010, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, is as good, if not better, than the comics and movie that inspired it. Which, for a licensed game released in the early 10s, was a nice change of pace. The art direction perfectly captures the style of the later comic volumes, the loose story of the game does just enough with the world and characters to be endearing, and Anamanaguchi's score is an absolute bop, if not an outright banger. Although the music isn't quite as good as the movie's Fire soundtrack, mostly because the game doesn't have any Beck or Brie Larson songs. But then again, painfully few OSTs do.
Hello again, friend of a friend, I knew you were.
Getting back to the point, the game also helped revitalize the beat-em-up genre at a time when it was starting to stagnate. In short, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, is a pretty good video game, and an amazing one if you were a nerdy teenager between 2010 and 2014 like I was. This re-release comes with some caveats, though. In the years since Ubisoft delisted the game, a lot of unsavory material has come out about the company, with 2020 revealing that it was a dangerous environment for people working there. Furthermore, it's come out that leadership at Ubisoft had extremely problematic political and social opinions, deliberately contributed to women being underrepresented in games, and conflated a civil rights movement to a terrorist organization. Between all of this, and the fact that much of the original team behind the game isn't involved in this re-release, many gamers are left asking themselves, is it ethical for me to buy Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, Complete Edition? No, it's not. Okay, so obviously it's a little more complicated than that, and this prompt is mostly just an excuse to create a master doc compiling all of the really shitty stuff Ubisoft's done. So let's get into why you shouldn't give Ubisoft your money. Members of leadership at Ubisoft were scumbags and performed a wide variety of misconduct while they were gainfully employed. Maxime Belland, one of Ubisoft's co-founders, allegedly choked a female co-worker at a company party. Employees have said that the lack of disciplinary action against Belland and his overt sexist behavior made them feel like there was a culture of sexism at the company. Which there was, and still could very well be, even after Belland's resignation, as many described the company's Toronto studio as having a party culture, and generally using free booze and company events as an excuse not to pay their employees more. Sergei Heskot, the creative lead that had final say on the game's content, also left Ubisoft in 2020. Heskot actively prevented women from being the lead character in Ubisoft games based on the assumption that games featuring prominent female characters wouldn't sell well. Oh, and he also supposedly helped propagate Ubisoft's culture of sexism by playing a sexually explicit song featuring the name of a female co-worker when she left a meeting. Tommy Francois, the vice president of editorial and creative services, which is to say Sergei Heskot's lackey, was fired after an investigation into his alleged sexual misconduct. Yannis Mallet, the person leading Ubisoft's Canadian studios, also left the company amid this controversy. Employees filed numerous complaints to Ubisoft's HR department after the actions of these executives, all of which seemingly went ignored until recently. It's no wonder then that Ubisoft's general head of HR, Cécile Cornette, also left the company as, on paper, the company's HR department is supposed to prevent any of this misconduct from happening. In fact, things were so bad at Ubisoft that an internal survey revealed that 1 in 4 employees witnessed some form of misconduct while doing their job. Imagine for a second working at a place where inappropriate behavior is so common that 25% of your coworkers tell their bosses that they saw something inappropriate. In case you've never worked anywhere before, people generally don't like to bring these issues up, even in an anonymous survey, meaning that the number of witnesses was likely much higher and the behavior much more widespread than we know now. In the face of all of these allegations and the stellar reporting around them, it's very hard to believe that Ubisoft co-founder and CEO Yves Guillemot was not aware of this culture in his company. In fact, it seems more likely that Guillemot elevated these individuals into positions of power in spite of, or perhaps even because of, their problematic behavior and beliefs. While the immediate bad actors may be gone from the company, Guillemot is not, and any money spent on Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, Complete Edition, is to the direct benefit of the person who enabled this detestable situation. Ubisoft also put the Black Lives Matter fist in a Tom Clancy mobile game and said that it was a logo for a terrorist organization. How does that even happen? How does a company at the forefront of a billion-dollar industry make such a callous and avoidable fuck-up? Oh, the manager of the studio that made it, Alliant, as well as the director of the game, is Charlie Guillemot, Yves Guillemot's son. And now everyone who's ever worked for a family-owned business knows exactly how Ubisoft got to where it is today. To top it all off, the remaining Ubisoft leadership is composed of cowards, and they refuse to address this situation during their Ubisoft Forward showcase event. Where does this leave an ethically conscious Scott Pilgrim fan wanting to play this game? Probably trying to rationalize how they can give money to an inarguably problematic company in exchange for a toy they want. Even if the bosses are bad, that doesn't mean that the people who made the game are. A gamer might argue while clutching their Scott Pilgrim Color Collection box set. Their work deserves to be purchased and praised so that they can more easily get a job at a better company. That's a popular, if flawed, argument in circumstances similar to this one, but isn't really applicable here as Brian Lee O'Malley doesn't profit off the sale of this game. He also said that the original team behind it isn't involved in this re-release. To be fair though, O'Malley does seem pretty jazzed about the game returning, if for no other reason than it's a cool piece of media that was seemingly lost to time. The fact of the matter is, the people most responsible for this game existing aren't going to profit from the sales of this re-release. Buying a copy now only pads the coffers of those at the top of Ubisoft who have proven themselves to be pretty scummy. Also, if you wanted to support Brian Lee O'Malley, you could just buy the Scott Pilgrim comics. They're pretty good, if dated in the way that a lot of media from the aughts are. Seconds is pretty good too, and I really need to make time to read Snot Girl, but hear good things. From here, the last desperate argument made by somebody who really wants to buy the Scott Pilgrim game might be something like, well, not buying a game from a bad company isn't going to hurt the abusers within it. It'll only lead to the most expendable employees being fired or paid less. Again, that's fair, and the gaming industry as a whole needs to get out of the practice of tying bonuses to sales figures and Metacritic scores. Or, in the case of CD Projekt Red, giving out tokens to employees who deserved honors, which almost certainly means they were crunching really hard and didn't complain about it. All of that nonsense definitely deserves its own essay, which I might get to by 2023 if my pace of one self-published piece every 2 years keeps up. The thing is, this argument doesn't really apply to this situation. The Scott Pilgrim re-release is a cash grab by Ubisoft, even if fans really want it. It would be a shock if any more work went into the Complete Edition beyond getting it running on modern systems and having the DLC available from the start. This is a profit generator slipped into Ubisoft's Q1 2021 lineup, as they don't have any major releases coming up, other than the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake in March.
Only the dagger can unlock the Sands of Time.
Meaning that Ubisoft doesn't have any major releases this quarter. It's hard to envision anyone at Ubisoft getting axed if this game underperforms. Hell, it's hard to see anything changing at Ubisoft at all if this game only manages to break even after licensing costs and the minimal development expenditure. If it does well, it'll be a nice windfall for them, and if it doesn't, then at least they earn some desperately needed goodwill from gamers. It's clear that Ubisoft is a company that you really shouldn't support through purchasing their products, and that justifications for this transaction don't hold up under scrutiny. So, what are socially conscious gamers to do then? Not buy the game? If you're so inclined, kudos. Organize a boycott of the Scott Pilgrim game? Maybe, but those don't really work in the gaming industry. The sad truth is that not buying a game has never been an effective strategy for creating direct and intended change in the world of gaming. Jim Sterling has a great video covering the history of video game boycotts, and, spoiler alert, they usually fail because people buy the game. Whether it be Modern Warfare 2 or Pokemon Sword and Shield, people will buy a favorably reviewed game even if there's a part of it they don't like. Gamers are a too large and varied group for a boycott to work in a meaningful capacity, even when the issues surrounding a game are as significant as serial harassers profiting from it, and not just some people disliking a treat. Yeah, the hullabaloo around Pokemon Sword and Shield really was the moment that boycotts became untenable in the gaming sphere. Don't worry, you're not a monster for buying Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, Complete Edition. People have defended supporting worse pieces of media from even shittier people, and unfortunately a lot of games today are made under some kind of duress. There are some things you can do to help make the gaming industry more sustainable and less skeezy though. The first is supporting games from smaller studios that develop their titles in healthy working conditions. Hades from Supergiant Games is a brilliant example of how an indie game can be successful while still valuing the health and safety of the people who made it. In supporting games like this, not only are you keeping the gaming landscape from becoming a purgatory of AAA sameness, you're helping prove that other models of video game production are possible. Things don't have to be as bad as they were, and maybe still are, at Ubisoft. And by elevating better companies, we can make Ubisoft the exception, and not the rule. A second option is directly supporting labor organization in the video game industry. Ubisoft isn't alone in its culture and how it treats employees, and the gaming industry is in need of systemic-level reform. If consumers can't pressure companies into changing, then the only ethical thing to do is support those within them taking action. This can be as simple as promoting the efforts of game industry workers trying to unionize, or donating to a legal fund so that those affected can fight the circumstances found in Ubisoft. As a rule of thumb, it's generally just a good idea to give money to good causes that need them, especially when power dynamics are as lopsided as they are between CEOs and employees in the gaming industry. These suggestions aren't groundbreaking, and hopefully aren't new to you, but they're the most the average consumer can do to help make things better for the most vulnerable people in the gaming industry. Which really sucks! Of all the industries that exist under the miasma of late-stage capitalism, gaming gets some of the worst of it. People enthused to work in the industry are undervalued, subject to harassment in their workplace and too often online, and either underpaid or forced to work so much that their hourly rate isn't all that great. Many of these problems also exist outside of gaming, but they're more apparent here thanks to the increased public scrutiny that most media companies receive. Workers in almost every industry aren't treated as well or paid as much as they should be. It's also a struggle to purchase only things made under wholly ethical circumstances. That's just how the world is today, and, well, I firmly believe we can change it if those outside of the billionaire class come together and demand that we do. It's not going to happen overnight. There's also no point in depriving yourself of something that brings you joy if there's no benefit from the deprivation. So, if you really want to, go ahead and buy Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, Complete Edition. I hope you enjoy it, and that it provides some kind of respite from the weight of having to participate in the many unethical systems that make up our society. Just remember who's profiting from your purchase, and do what you can to help the people who actually make the media you enjoy when the opportunity arises. Thank you so much for checking this out. This essay was originally a pitch that I floated around that a few outlets rejected, so I decided to make it on my own. If you want me to make something like this for you, I'm at LucasDeWriter on Twitter, and you can find my email without too much trouble if you would like to reach out to me more formally. I don't know if I'll personally pick up the Scott Pilgrim game again, but if I do, you can hear my impressions on the Voluntary Viewing podcast. Thanks again for watching/reading this, and good luck out there.